Have you ever looked around and wondered why that person, the one who's not as smart, not as hard-working, not even as talented as you, somehow manages to get ahead in life? That promotion you were eyeing, the business opportunity you deserved, or even the social recognition you've been working toward, all seemingly handed to others who appear less deserving. Why does this happen? And more importantly, what can you do about it? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. The world operates on principles that often feel fundamentally unfair. This isn't just pessimism talking. It's a reality that, once recognized, can become your greatest advantage. Think about it. How many brilliant minds do you know who struggle financially while someone with average intelligence drives a luxury car? How many skilled professionals remain underpaid while others with basic capabilities earn substantially more? Has this ever happened to you? Have you felt that crushing disappointment when merit seems to count for nothing in the face of other, less tangible factors? The uncomfortable truth is that success in our modern world often has less to do with raw intelligence, physical strength, or even specialized skills than we've been led to believe. Instead, it frequently favors those who understand something far more powerful: human psychology and social dynamics. You see, while you've been perfecting your craft, developing your expertise, and trusting in the meritocratic ideal, others have been studying something entirely different: how people think, what motivates them, and how decisions are really made. They've recognized that perception often trumps reality, that emotional connections outweigh logical arguments, and that understanding the unwritten rules of social engagement can be worth more than years of technical training. Stay with me until the end of this journey, because what I'm about to share might fundamentally change how you approach your career, relationships, and life goals. This isn't about becoming manipulative or abandoning your values. It's about removing the blindfold and seeing the playing field as it truly exists. The most successful people in history weren't necessarily the most intelligent or skilled. Instead, they possessed something perhaps more valuable: an intuitive or learned understanding of human behavior patterns and how to position themselves advantageously within social systems. What you're about to discover might surprise you, perhaps even disturb you at first. But this knowledge, once internalized, could be the key difference between watching opportunities pass you by and finally claiming the success you've always deserved. So, question isn't whether the world is fair or unfair. That debate was settled long ago. The real question is, now that you know the game isn't what you thought it was, are you ready to learn the actual rules? If you want to master the art of psychological influence, hit that subscribe button now. Join our community of deep thinkers. The game is rigged against those who believe in fairness and good intentions over psychological dominance. Machiavelli decoded the true mechanics of power, showing why ruthless strategists succeed. What made his insight so revolutionary was his willingness to separate power from morality, a distinction that, uncomfortable as it may be, reveals the hidden architecture of influence that operates beneath our idealized social narratives. This separation creates a profound transformation in how we understand human interaction. When you observe closely, you'll notice that effective power rarely announces itself. It operates in subtler dimensions, through psychological leverage points most people never consciously recognize. The leaders who master these principles don't need to raise their voices or make threats. They've created systems where others naturally align with their interests. Consider how often we witness the paradox of good people finishing last while those willing to bend ethical boundaries advance. This isn't random. It's a predictable outcome of misunderstanding the actual rules of engagement. The journey toward influence begins with accepting this uncomfortable truth. Being right isn't the same as being effective. The real revelation comes when you recognize that most people operate with a fundamental naivety about power dynamics. They believe the stated rules are the actual rules. But Machiavelli exposed the shadow game, the one where perception management trumps virtue, where strategic self-interest disguised as principle wins over transparent goodness. It's not that virtue has no place. Rather, its value depends entirely on how it's perceived and leveraged. Behind the scenes of every organization, every relationship, and every social structure, these dynamics play out daily. The executive who builds unwavering loyalty isn't necessarily the most qualified, but the one who understands psychological ownership. The politician who gains support isn't necessarily the most honest, but the one who crafts the most compelling narrative. The impact of these realities extends far beyond individual success. They shape entire institutions and societies. Now, I want to go even deeper into these principles by examining how strategic thinking transforms seemingly neutral decisions into leverage points. The mindset shift required isn't about abandoning values, but recognizing how they function within systems of influence. When you begin to decode these patterns, you'll see them everywhere, in media narratives, in corporate restructuring, even in casual social interactions with friends. What's particularly fascinating is how predictable human responses become once you understand these underlying mechanics. People respond to incentives, status cues, and psychological triggers in ways that can be anticipated and guided. The most skilled practitioners of influence don't fight against human nature. They work with it, often invisibly directing behavior through environmental design rather than direct commands. If any of this resonates with your observations of how things really work in your professional or personal life, type "power revealed" in the comments. I'm curious how many of you have already glimpsed these dynamics at play in your own experiences. Good men finish last because the world rewards influence over intelligence or good character. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but one that reveals a fundamental truth about human interaction. The most successful people aren't necessarily the smartest or most virtuous. They're the ones who understand how to wield influence effectively. Think about it. How many times have you watched someone less qualified get promoted, or seen a mediocre product dominate the market while superior alternatives fade into obscurity? This isn't random chance. It's the hidden architecture of influence at work. Don't miss my next psychological insight. Subscribe and be first to receive powerful tools for personal transformation. The uncomfortable reality is that human psychology operates on emotional triggers rather than rational assessment. We like to believe we make decisions based on facts and logic, but the transformation happens at a subconscious level. Our brains are wired to respond to confidence, social proof, and perceived authority more strongly than to actual competence. This explains why narcissists often rise to leadership positions. Their unwavering self-belief creates a gravitational pull that draws others in. Meanwhile, genuinely good people with integrity and intelligence might hesitate, qualifying their statements and acknowledging uncertainty, behaviors that signal weakness in the primal language of influence. The revelation here isn't that you should abandon your principles, but rather that understanding these dynamics gives you choices. You can remain oblivious and wonder why your talents go unrecognized, or you can learn the unwritten rules of the game. Behind the scenes of every successful career, relationship, or business venture is a nuanced understanding of influence. The most effective communicators know that facts alone rarely change minds. You must connect with people's underlying motivations, fears, and desires. This isn't manipulation. It's recognizing the reality of how humans actually make decisions. Consider how this plays out in everyday scenarios. In meetings, it's often not the person with the best idea who gets credit, but the one who presents it with conviction. In dating, attraction flows toward those who project value rather than those who desperately seek approval. In business, people buy based on emotional connection to brands, not just product specifications. The journey to influence doesn't require becoming someone you're not. Instead, it means developing a deeper awareness of these psychological triggers and learning to communicate your value in ways that resonate with others' natural decision-making processes. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining specific influence principles that allow you to maintain your integrity while still getting the recognition and results you deserve. These are the same patterns that determine whether someone listens to your ideas or dismisses them before you finish speaking. If this explanation of why good people often get overlooked is resonating with your own experiences, write, "This explains so much" in the comments below. Being ruthless might sound morally questionable, but there's a profound misinterpretation at play here. True ruthlessness isn't about cruelty or malice. It's about psychological sophistication. It's about recognizing the emotional barriers that hold most people back and having the mental clarity to move beyond them. Think about it this way. The most impactful leaders, entrepreneurs, and change makers throughout history understood that sentiment and traditional notions of fairness often act as invisible barriers to accomplishment. They weren't necessarily unkind people. They simply refused to let emotional attachments interfere with necessary decisions. This reveals an uncomfortable truth. The concept of fairness itself can be a psychological cage. Society promotes fairness as a virtue, but in reality, it often functions as a control mechanism, a convenient narrative that keeps the ambitious in check while maintaining the status quo. When you examine power structures closely, you'll notice that appeals to fairness typically come from those without leverage. The revelation here isn't that you should abandon ethics or compassion. Rather, it's about recognizing when your adherence to conventional fairness is actually self-sabotage in disguise. True power comes from understanding this distinction and making decisions based on reality rather than comforting illusions. I've witnessed countless transformation journeys where individuals remained stuck precisely because they couldn't overcome their programming about what constituted fair play. They waited for recognition that never came, opportunities they deserved, or reciprocity from systems designed to extract rather than reward. The mindset shift here is subtle but profound. Instead of viewing ruthlessness as the absence of humanity, see it as the presence of clarity. It means developing the capacity to assess situations without the distortion of wishful thinking. It's about understanding that in competitive landscapes, the rules are rarely what they appear to be on the surface. Behind the scenes of every major success story, you'll find moments where difficult choices were made, not because the decision-makers were heartless, but because they understood the hidden mechanics of advancement. They recognized when sentiment was being weaponized against their progress. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining how this understanding of ruthlessness applies to different domains of life. Because once you grasp this concept, you'll start seeing its manifestations everywhere, from corporate boardrooms to personal relationships. If you're nodding along as you hear this because it resonates with experiences from your own life, type reality check in the comments below. Emotional discipline is the bedrock of true ruthlessness. Think about it. When someone can predict your emotional reactions, they essentially hold the blueprint to your decision-making process. It's like handing someone the keys to your mental kingdom. The most dangerous negotiators I've ever encountered weren't the loud, intimidating types. They were the ones who maintained perfect emotional equilibrium, while systematically dismantling their opposition. They understood that emotional reactions are tactical liabilities. Consider how often we've all made decisions we later regretted because we were caught in an emotional storm. Maybe it was anger causing you to send that text you wish you could take back, or fear preventing you from taking a calculated risk that could have transformed your circumstances. These emotional impulses create predictable patterns that others can exploit. I've witnessed this dynamic countless times in high-stakes business negotiations, when one party shows their emotional hand, whether through frustration, eagerness, or anxiety, the other side immediately adjusts their strategy to capitalize on that vulnerability. The moment you reveal that something deeply matters to you emotionally, you've surrendered leverage. This isn't about becoming cold or unfeeling. It's about developing the inner architecture to process emotions privately, before acting externally. The transformation comes when you can experience the full spectrum of your feelings without allowing them to dictate your visible responses. Think of emotional discipline as creating a buffer zone between what you feel and how you respond. This internal processing space is where strategic thinking happens. Without it, you're essentially operating on autopilot, reacting to triggers that others can easily identify and exploit. The hidden truth behind emotional discipline is that it actually allows for more authentic connections, not fewer. When you're not constantly hijacked by emotional reactivity, you can choose when and how to be vulnerable, rather than having vulnerability forced upon you in moments of weakness. Developing this capacity isn't about suppressing emotions. That approach eventually backfires through emotional outbursts or burnout. Instead, it's about expanding your ability to hold emotional tension without immediate discharge. This creates space for more deliberate choices that align with your long-term objectives, rather than short-term emotional relief. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring specific techniques for developing emotional discipline in high-pressure situations, because the journey toward mastering your emotional responses requires both understanding and practical application. If this perspective on emotional discipline resonates with your experiences, write "discipline equals freedom" in the comments below. Psychological dominance is truly more valuable than likability, especially when you understand the deeper reality of human interactions. It's not about being liked, it's about commanding respect through your presence. The individuals who maintain the strongest influence aren't necessarily those who charm everyone, but those who establish clear boundaries and ensure there are consequences when those boundaries are crossed. Think about the transformative power this understanding brings to every interaction. When you walk into a room with psychological dominance, people instinctively sense a different energy. They may not be able to articulate it, but something in their primitive brain recognizes your presence as someone who shouldn't be trifled with. This is the hidden truth behind many successful relationships, whether professional or personal. I've observed this mindset shift in action countless times. Take James, for example, a client who was constantly being interrupted in meetings despite being well liked by his colleagues. After working on his psychological presence, maintaining unwavering eye contact, speaking with deliberate pacing, and calmly but firmly addressing interruptions, the dynamic completely changed. The same people who would talk over him now wait for him to finish his thoughts. The journey towards psychological dominance begins with internal conviction. You must first believe in your own worth before others will recognize it. This isn't about arrogance, but rather a quiet, unshakable confidence that communicates, "I know my value, and I expect to be treated accordingly." When you embody this truth, others naturally align with your expectation. What's fascinating is how this principle transcends cultural boundaries. From boardrooms in New York to negotiations in Tokyo, the fundamentals remain consistent. Those who establish psychological dominance set the tone for how they'll be treated. They understand that respect isn't requested. It's commanded through consistent behavior and clear expectations. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining how psychological dominance manifests in everyday scenarios, even when you're not explicitly thinking about it. Your body language, vocal tonality, and response to subtle challenges all communicate whether you possess this quality or not. The revelations about how others read these signals will transform how you approach important interactions. If anything I've said has resonated with your experiences or observations, write "respect is earned" in the comments. I'm curious how many of you have already noticed this dynamic playing out in your lives. Moving from likability to dominance requires a fundamental shift in how you view social interactions. While many of us have been conditioned to seek approval and avoid conflict at all costs, the truth is that social power operates by different rules entirely. This transformation isn't about becoming unpleasant. It's about prioritizing impact over validation. When you're constantly seeking approval, you surrender your power to others. You're essentially saying, "Your opinion of me matters more than my opinion of myself." This mindset creates a psychological dependence that savvy people can sense and, unfortunately, sometimes exploit. The journey toward genuine influence begins when you recognize this pattern and consciously break it. I've observed countless situations where the most respected person in the room wasn't the nicest, but rather the most decisive. They didn't pause to gather consensus before expressing their thoughts. They didn't water down their opinions to make them more palatable. Instead, they created psychological superiority through their unwavering confidence in their own judgment. The hidden truth here is that dominance isn't about intimidation. It's about certainty. When you act with conviction, you naturally draw people into your reality rather than being pulled into theirs. This creates a subtle but powerful gravity that others respond to, often without even realizing why they're deferring to you. Consider how often you found yourself agreeing with someone simply because they seemed so sure of themselves. That's not coincidence. It's human nature. We're wired to follow those who demonstrate unwavering belief in their own path. The most influential people leverage this psychological principle not through manipulation, but through authentic self-assurance. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how specific verbal and non-verbal cues can dramatically shift your presence from pleasing to commanding. These subtle adjustments in communication style create immediate changes in how others perceive and respond to you. The fascinating part is that these shifts don't require you to become someone else. They simply amplify aspects of yourself that you've likely been suppressing in your quest to be liked. If you've ever felt that strange combination of respect and frustration toward someone who seems to effortlessly command attention, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Write "command respect" in the comments if you've encountered someone with this natural authority and want to develop it yourself. Weak warnings teach others to ignore threats, whereas decisive actions establish respect. Perception management is vital as it shapes how others perceive you, often more than reality does. This principle extends beyond just personal confrontations into every aspect of life where your boundaries meet others. Think about it. When parents repeatedly threaten consequences but never follow through, children quickly learn these warnings are meaningless. The same psychological mechanism operates in professional settings, friendships, and yes, even in those moments when your physical safety might be at risk. What's fascinating is how this connects to our evolutionary wiring. Throughout human history, those who could effectively signal their boundaries and enforce them survived and thrived. It's not about aggression, it's about clarity. The mind instinctively respects clear boundaries because they represent order in a chaotic world. This journey toward establishing proper boundaries requires an internal transformation first. Many people struggle with this because they've been conditioned to believe that being accommodating equals being good. But there's a profound difference between generosity from strength versus compliance from fear. Behind the scenes of every successful negotiation or de-escalation is this hidden truth. Respect precedes resolution. When others sense you've established a clear line they shouldn't cross, they're actually more comfortable, not less. It creates psychological safety for everyone involved. The most revealing insight comes when we examine cultures with strong social codes. In these environments, physical confrontations are often less common, precisely because everyone understands the unwritten rules. The boundaries are clear, and the consequences for violating them are consistent. I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining how perception management works on a neurological level. Your brain is constantly scanning for signals that indicate where you stand in any social hierarchy. When you project clarity about your boundaries, you activate different neural pathways in observers than when you project uncertainty. The impact of mastering this skill extends far beyond avoiding physical confrontations. It affects how people respond to your ideas, your leadership, and even how they value your time and attention. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to reinforce your personal boundary system. If you're nodding along to this, type "boundaries equal respect" in the comments. I'd love to know who's connecting with this concept as we continue exploring these powerful principles. Beyond just appearance, people respond to the entire image you project, your tone, your posture, and especially how you present your thoughts. This strategic approach to self-presentation creates a framework through which others interpret everything you do. When you understand this dynamic, you realize that perception management isn't manipulation. It's a fundamental social skill that everyone uses, whether consciously or not. Think about historical figures whose narratives were carefully crafted. Churchill, for instance, wasn't just leading Britain through war. He was consciously shaping how history would remember both the conflict and his role in it. He once famously remarked, "History will be kind to me, for I intend to write it." This wasn't mere vanity, it was a profound understanding of narrative control. In your own life, this same principle applies on a more intimate scale. The stories you tell about your experiences, both to others and to yourself, create the framework through which your identity is understood. We often underestimate this transformative power. When you reframe a personal setback as a valuable lesson rather than a failure, you're not just putting a positive spin on things, you're actually reshaping your psychological reality and how others perceive your journey. What's particularly fascinating about this hidden truth is how it operates below conscious awareness most of the time. The colleague who always frames their ideas as solutions to problems rather than complaints is practicing narrative control. The friend who consistently positions their life choices as deliberate rather than accidental is crafting their image. These aren't calculated deceptions, they're natural expressions of how humans shape social reality. The most effective practitioners of this art never make their narrative control obvious. Instead, they create consistent, authentic presentations that align with their genuine strengths while strategically positioning potential weaknesses. Consider how effective leaders rarely deny their limitations. Instead, they acknowledge them while simultaneously highlighting how those same qualities connect to their unique contributions. Now, I want to go even deeper into this relationship between image crafting and authentic communication. There's a delicate balance between strategic presentation and genuine connection that few people truly master. When you understand the principles behind this balance, you gain access to a level of social understanding that transforms how you navigate every interaction. If what I've shared resonates with your own observations about human behavior, Write "Perception Shapes Reality" in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you've seen this principle play out in your own experiences. Here's the thing about human psychology. We're naturally drawn to the simplest, most compelling explanations we encounter. It's not about intelligence or willpower. It's how our brains are wired. When someone presents us with a clear, persuasive narrative first, that story creates deep neural pathways that become our default understanding. This cognitive anchoring explains why first impressions are so powerful across all domains of life. This pattern plays out in parenting constantly. The parent who consistently establishes clear boundaries through systematic consequences doesn't need to raise their voice or make threats. Their authority becomes an unquestioned reality in the child's mind. It's a profound transformation in the parent-child dynamic when kids simply know that certain behaviors lead to specific outcomes. No drama needed. What's fascinating about this journey is that your calm consistency actually rewires your child's expectations. They develop an internal compass that guides their decision-making even when you're not around. This isn't just about behavior management, it's about helping them develop the mental framework they'll carry into adulthood. Behind the scenes of every parent who masters this approach is a personal evolution. You'll discover that your own emotional triggers become less powerful. That moment when your child tests a boundary no longer feels like a personal attack or a reflection of your parenting abilities. Instead, it's simply information, an opportunity to reinforce the systems you've put in place. The hidden truth many parents miss is that children fundamentally crave this kind of structured environment. Despite what their protests might suggest, the predictability of systematic consequences provides a sense of security that emotional reactions never can. Their developing brains are constantly mapping their world, trying to understand how it works. When the rules are clear and consistently applied, they can focus their energy on growth rather than constantly testing boundaries. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring exactly how to implement these systematic consequences in age-appropriate ways. There's a delicate balance between being consistent and being developmentally appropriate, and understanding this distinction makes all the difference in your effectiveness. If this perspective on parenting resonates with your experiences, write "consistency over drama" in the comments below. Authority rooted in predictable systems is indeed a cornerstone of lasting influence. When you establish clear, consistent patterns in your interactions, people naturally align with your leadership without resistance. Think about the most respected figures in your life. They likely created an environment where expectations were transparent and consequences were fair. This predictability creates a framework where others willingly surrender control. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining how silent dominance transforms relationships. The most powerful people rarely announce their authority. They simply embody it. Their influence operates like gravity, an invisible force that shapes everything around it without making a sound. This silent authority manifests through micro-expressions, deliberate pauses, and an unwavering inner confidence that doesn't require validation. Consider the profound impact of stillness in a world of noise. When everyone else is scrambling to assert themselves verbally, the person who remains composed creates a magnetic pull. This is the hidden dimension of authority that few recognize, but everyone feels. It's about creating moments of meaningful silence that speak volumes about your self-assurance. The journey toward developing this kind of presence involves a fundamental mindset shift. Rather than viewing authority as something you actively project outward, recognize it as an internal state that naturally radiates from within. This subtle reframing transforms how others perceive and respond to you. The weight of your presence becomes something others can feel before you even speak. Behind the scenes of every powerful interaction is this invisible architecture of influence. When you master predictable systems alongside silent dominance, you're no longer fighting for authority, you're simply embodying it. Think about how different your relationships would be if you no longer needed to verbally assert your position, but instead cultivated a presence that commanded respect automatically. This revelation often comes as a surprise to those who have spent years trying to force their authority through loud declarations or aggressive posturing. True power operates with remarkable efficiency. It accomplishes more with less. The most influential people understand that authority isn't something you demand, it's something you earn through consistency and presence. If what I'm saying resonates with your experiences or observations about leadership dynamics, type "silent power activated" in the comments section below. Truly powerful individuals observe, calculate, and position themselves quietly. Results speak louder than words, indicating true silent dominance. They understand that broadcasting their ambitions only invites unnecessary competition and resistance. This is the essence of the hidden power that shapes our world from the shadows. Think about the most transformative moments in your life. Were they accompanied by fanfare and announcements, or did they unfold naturally through consistent, deliberate action? The journey toward genuine influence follows a similar pattern. While others declare their intentions to conquer, the truly powerful are already mapping the terrain, identifying leverage points, and establishing strategic connections. Consider how nature itself demonstrates this principle. A tree doesn't announce its growth. It simply grows day by day, establishing deep roots beneath the surface where no one can see. The most devastating forces in nature, earthquakes, currents, gravity, operate in complete silence until their impact becomes undeniable. The revelation here is that power becomes diluted when advertised. Every declaration of your intentions provides valuable intelligence to your competition and creates unnecessary obstacles in your path. This doesn't mean operating with malice or deceit. Rather, it's about recognizing the strategic advantage of discretion. I've witnessed this pattern repeatedly among genuinely successful people. They rarely speak about what they're building until it's substantially complete. They understand that energy spent convincing others of your potential is energy diverted from actualizing that potential. The mindset shift is profound, from seeking validation for your plans to seeking results that speak for themselves. Behind the scenes of every overnight success story lies years of quiet, determined work. While attention seekers rise and fall with predictable regularity, the architects of lasting change maintain their focus regardless of who's watching. They recognize that attention itself is a resource best conserved and deployed strategically, not squandered for momentary ego gratification. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining how this principle applies across different domains of life, whether in career advancement, relationship building, or personal development. The pattern remains consistent. Those who channel their energy into tangible outcomes rather than impressive appearances inevitably emerge with greater influence. This silent approach requires patience and confidence, the certainty that your work will eventually speak for itself. It demands the emotional maturity to delay gratification and resist the temptation to seek validation prematurely. In a world obsessed with visibility and instant recognition, this patience becomes an increasingly rare and valuable asset. If what I'm saying resonates with your own observations about true power, write "silent strength" in the comments below. Psychological warfare ensures those who understand it control those who don't. It's a hidden reality that shapes our daily interactions far more than most realize. Once you grasp these principles, you'll notice them everywhere. in advertising, political speeches, workplace dynamics, and even personal relationships. This awareness creates a fundamental shift in how you perceive the world around you. The journey toward understanding psychological influence is transformative. Many go through life unconsciously responding to triggers designed by those who've mastered these techniques. It's like watching a chess match where one player doesn't know the rules. The outcome is predetermined. But here's the revelation that changes everything. Once you recognize these patterns, you can't unsee them. Consider how pricing psychology works. When you see $19.99 instead of $20, your rational mind knows the difference is negligible, yet research consistently shows this tiny manipulation drives more sales. This isn't coincidence, it's deliberate. Psychological engineering. The same principles apply when someone uses artificial scarcity, only 3 left, or social proof, 98% of customers recommend, to influence your decisions. The most powerful aspect of this knowledge isn't just recognizing when others use these tactics on you, it's understanding the deeper human needs these techniques target. Fear of missing out, desire for belonging, need for certainty. These fundamental drivers of human behavior have remained unchanged for thousands of years, though the methods to trigger them have evolved. Behind the scenes of every influential message is a calculated understanding of human psychology. Political campaigns craft messages not based on what's necessarily true, but on what resonates emotionally. Corporations design experiences not just to satisfy customers, but to create psychological dependence on their products. Even the layout of your favorite store is meticulously designed to maximize psychological impact on purchasing decisions. The mindset shift comes when you realize that influence isn't inherently manipulative, it's simply understanding human nature. The difference between ethical influence and manipulation lies in intention and transparency. Ethical influence helps people make better decisions, aligned with their true interests, while manipulation exploits psychological vulnerabilities for one-sided gain. Most fascinating is how these principles work, even when we're aware of them. I can tell you exactly how a particular influence technique works, and it can still affect your decisions if skillfully applied. This isn't because you're weak-minded, it's because these techniques tap into automatic neural pathways built into our biology. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how these psychological principles are embedded in our digital landscape, creating unprecedented opportunities for both influence and manipulation. The algorithms that determine what content you see online aren't neutral. They're specifically engineered to maximize your engagement through psychological triggers. If this conversation is making you more aware of the psychological influences in your life, write "eyes opened" in the comments below. The world benefits from individuals who build influence and confidence through strategic understanding. Psychologically dominant people succeed by exploiting fairness and strategic thinking. But this journey toward influence isn't merely about manipulating others, it's about creating a presence that naturally commands respect. I've observed that truly influential people don't need to announce their importance. They've mastered what psychologists call presence cultivation, the ability to occupy space in a room both physically and energetically without seeming desperate for attention. This skill transforms ordinary interactions into opportunities for connection and impact. Consider how you react when someone speaks with absolute conviction versus hesitation. Our brains are wired to follow certainty, even when that certainty isn't based on superior knowledge. This psychological principle explains why confident people often rise to leadership positions regardless of their actual competence. The revelation here isn't that confidence trumps competence, but that perceived confidence creates a reality of its own. What's fascinating about strategic influence is how it operates beneath conscious awareness. When you maintain eye contact slightly, longer than the average person, stand with balanced posture, or speak at a measured pace, you're activating primal trust mechanisms in others. These subtle signals bypass rational analysis and speak directly to the instinctual brain that makes split-second judgments about who deserves attention. The hidden truth many miss is that influence isn't something you're born with. It's a craft you develop through deliberate practice and self-awareness. Every interaction becomes a laboratory for refining your approach. Those who master this craft understand that genuine connection actually strengthens influence rather than weakening it. Vulnerability, strategically shared, creates bonds that manipulation never could. I want to go even deeper into the psychology of presence. The most compelling individuals I've studied share an uncanny ability to remain fully present in conversations. While others mentally prepare their next response, these masters of influence listen with their entire being. This complete attention makes others feel valued in a world where distraction is the norm. The impact of this simple practice cannot be overstated. People naturally gravitate toward those who make them feel significant. The journey toward greater influence often requires shedding behaviors that undermine your presence. Frequent apologizing, permission-seeking phrases, and nervous gestures all subtly communicate uncertainty. As you eliminate these habits, notice how differently people respond to you. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, but each small adjustment compounds over time. If any of these insights have sparked recognition about your own communication patterns, write "Presence Matters" in the comments. Now, I want to explore how we can apply these principles in situations where the stakes are highest. Being strategically formidable ensures one's influence and respect in the real world. You see, there's a delicate balance that most people miss entirely. They believe that being likable is the key to success, but I've discovered through years of observation that this is only part of the equation. True influence comes from being both respected and, in some situations, slightly feared. Think about the people who truly influence your decisions. They're rarely just the nice guys. They're the individuals who possess a certain edge, a clear boundary that others instinctively know not to cross. This strategic formidability isn't about intimidation or aggression. It's about psychological positioning that communicates your value without saying a word. I've witnessed countless transformations where previously invisible people suddenly commanded attention in rooms by understanding this principle. They stopped being perpetually accommodating and instead cultivated what psychologists call controlled inaccessibility. This concept is powerful because it taps into our human tendency to value what seems slightly out of reach. Consider how respect operates in professional environments. The journey toward influence isn't just about competence, it's about the perception of boundaries. When you're too available, too eager to please, you inadvertently signal low social value. The hidden truth here is counterintuitive. Sometimes taking a step back creates more pull than pushing forward. The most respected individuals I've studied maintain what I call a respect buffer. They're warm and engaging, but there's an invisible line that communicates, "I have boundaries that shouldn't be crossed." This buffer doesn't push people away. Rather, it creates a magnetic field of intrigue and respect. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining how this principle manifests in everyday interactions. The psychological mechanism at play is fascinating. Humans naturally organize themselves into social hierarchies, and your positioning within these structures isn't random. It's deeply influenced by subtle behavioral cues that operate below. Conscious awareness. Think about someone who consistently gets overlooked in meetings despite having brilliant ideas. The issue rarely lies with their intelligence or even their communication skills. The underlying problem is often their psychological framing. They haven't established the subconscious markers of someone who demands attention. The revelation that changed everything for me was understanding that respect isn't given freely. It must be claimed through deliberate, psychological positioning. This isn't manipulation. It's a recognition of how human social dynamics actually function beneath the surface. When you align your behavior with these deeper truths, the shift in how others respond to you can feel almost magical. What's particularly fascinating is how this principle crosses cultural boundaries. Whether in corporate boardrooms or social gatherings, the same fundamental psychological patterns emerge. Those who understand the balance between warmth and strength invariably rise to positions of influence. If what I've shared resonates with your own experiences, write strategic respect in the comments. I'd love to know if you've observed these patterns playing out in your own life. Embracing strategic power means refusing to be dominated mentally by others. You see, true influence is built through psychological strength, not mere niceness without backbone. I've observed how people who prioritize being liked above all else often find themselves manipulated in both their personal and professional lives. This isn't about becoming cold or calculating. It's about developing an inner fortress that others can sense. Think about the most respected people in your life. Do they constantly seek approval? Rarely. There's a certain magnetism that comes from someone who knows their worth and operates from that foundation. This is the hidden transformation that occurs when you stop outsourcing your power to others. I remember working with a client who was constantly undermined at work despite being incredibly competent. Every meeting, she'd apologize before speaking, qualify her statements, and bend over backward to accommodate everyone's input. The revelation came when she realized her excessive accommodation was actually diminishing others' perception of her value. Behind the scenes of influence is this counterintuitive truth. Boundaries create respect. When you clearly communicate what you will and won't accept, people instinctively recognize your self-worth. This journey towards strategic power isn't about dominating others. It's about refusing to let your mental space be dominated. The impact of this mindset shift extends far beyond work. In relationships, families, and communities, those who balance warmth with strength tend to become natural leaders. They create safe spaces precisely because they don't tolerate toxic behavior or manipulation. Now, I want to go even deeper into this concept of strategic power by exploring the difference between reactive and proactive influence. Most people spend their lives reacting to others' moves, constantly adjusting themselves to fit external expectations. But those with true influence understand how to set the terms of engagement from the beginning. Consider how differently people respond to someone who is clearly operating from their own center of gravity versus someone who is constantly orbiting around others' approval. One commands natural respect. The other tends to invite testing behaviors from others. This isn't about creating artificial scarcity or playing mind games. It's about authentically valuing yourself enough that others naturally do the same. The decisions you make about how accessible you are, how quickly you respond, how much you accommodate others' preferences at the expense of your own, these seemingly small choices add up to create your influence footprint. Many of us were taught that being perpetually available and agreeable was the path to connection, when in reality it often leads to being taken for granted. If this discussion is resonating with you, write in the comments, "Building my inner fortress," so I know we're on the same wavelength about developing this kind of psychological strength. Those who understand human psychology create lives of genuine influence. Awakening to these truths can transform someone from naive and overlooked to influential and impossible to ignore. The journey of psychological awareness isn't just academic. It's a profound transformation that reshapes your entire reality. When you begin perceiving the hidden patterns behind human behavior, everyday interactions take on new dimensions. That casual conversation at work? Now you can see the subtle bids for validation. The friend who always manages to change your mind. You recognize their masterful framing techniques. What's fascinating is how this awareness creates a ripple effect in your life. People start responding to you differently, almost magnetically, though they can't quite explain why. You're saying essentially the same things, but somehow your words carry more weight. This isn't manipulation, it's alignment with how the human mind naturally works. Consider how understanding psychological triggers transformed my approach to difficult conversations. Instead of charging into sensitive topics with my previously blunt approach, I learned to create psychological safety first. The results were remarkable. People who had always been defensive became open to genuine dialogue. The same message delivered through a psychologically informed approach landed completely differently. Behind the scenes of every human interaction is a complex dance of cognitive biases, emotional needs, and unconscious motivations. When you learn to navigate this invisible landscape, you develop a kind of social fluency that others experience as natural charisma or leadership presence. You're not doing more, you're simply wasting less energy on approaches that contradict how the human mind operates. This revelation often marks a turning point in people's lives. A client once told me, "I feel like I've been playing chess without knowing how the pieces move for my entire life." There's something profoundly liberating about finally seeing the patterns that have always influenced you, whether you recognize them or not. The truth is, we're all psychologists in a way. We all have theories about why people do what they do. The difference is between having untested assumptions versus evidence-based understanding. When you upgrade these mental models, decisions that once seemed confusing become clear. Relationships that were once strained become sources of connection. Work challenges that seemed insurmountable become fascinating puzzles with discoverable solutions. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how these psychological insights apply specifically to the moments when you feel most stuck or misunderstood. Because these principles aren't just theoretical, they're practical tools for navigating life's most challenging moments with greater ease and effectiveness. If you're nodding along as I speak, write "Psychology Unlocked" in the comments below. I'd love to know who else is on this journey of psychological discovery. The real transformation begins when we realize that in every facet of life, from personal relationships to business negotiations, those who understand the mechanics of influence are the ones who shape the outcomes. Machiavelli wasn't simply offering political advice, he was revealing the hidden architecture of human interaction that exists, whether we acknowledge it or not. Consider what happens when you truly grasp the concept that people respect what they fear more than what they love. This insight isn't meant to turn you into a tyrant, but rather to awaken you to the reality that boundaries without consequences are merely suggestions. How many times have you been too accommodating, only to find yourself taken advantage of? The revelation here isn't about becoming cruel, it's about recognizing the natural order of respect. The journey toward personal power requires this fundamental mindset shift. When I stopped apologizing for taking up space and started embodying the principles Machiavelli outlined, doors that were previously closed began to open. Decision-makers suddenly found time in their schedules. Negotiations that once felt like uphill battles became conversations where my position was genuinely considered. But here's what's fascinating about the application of these principles. They work silently. The most effective power moves are those that others don't even recognize as strategic. When you enter a room with the quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth, you're already implementing Machiavelli's wisdom without saying a word. This isn't manipulation. It's self-alignment with how human systems naturally function. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining the specific mechanisms that make these principles so effective across different contexts. Think about the last time you were truly impressed by someone's presence. What was it about them that commanded your attention? Chances are they were embodying several of these Machiavellian traits without even knowing it. The impact of these principles extends far beyond the boardroom or political arena. Even in your closest relationships, understanding the balance between being feared and being loved creates a foundation of mutual respect that casual kindness alone cannot achieve. This doesn't mean intimidating those you care about. It means establishing clear boundaries that demonstrate self-respect first. Behind the scenes of every successful negotiation, every promotion earned, every relationship that stands the test of time, you'll find people who instinctively understand these dynamics. Some were born with this intuition, others learned it through painful experience. The good news is that these principles can be studied and adopted by anyone willing to see the world as it is rather than as we wish it to be. If you're nodding along as you listen to this, sensing the truth in these observations from your own experiences, type "power recognized" in the comments. I'm curious to know how many of you have already witnessed these principles at work in your own lives, even before putting words to them. The beauty of psychological power lies in its quiet subtlety. While others frantically chase authority through brute force or desperate attempts at control, those who master psychological dynamics move with an almost invisible grace. This isn't manipulation. It's understanding human nature at its core. Consider how narrative framing transforms your entire reality. When you consciously choose the stories you tell yourself about challenges, relationships, or setbacks, you're not just being optimistic. You're rewiring your brain's response patterns. I've watched people transform seemingly devastating failures into pivotal turning points simply by reframing the narrative from "this destroyed me" to "this revealed what I truly need." The hidden truth most miss is that emotional discipline acts as the foundation for all other forms of psychological strength. In a world designed to trigger emotional reactions, from news headlines to social media algorithms, the person who maintains their emotional center holds an almost supernatural advantage. They make decisions others can't even conceive of because they're not clouded by reactive emotions. What fascinates me about strategic perception is how it creates ripple effects throughout your entire life journey. When you deliberately choose what deserves your attention and what doesn't, you're essentially sculpting your mental landscape. This isn't about ignoring problems. It's about allocating your precious cognitive resources where they'll generate the highest return on investment. Now, I want to go even deeper into how these principles manifest in our social interactions. The concept of proactive image crafting often makes people uncomfortable because it sounds inauthentic, but there's profound wisdom here. We all project an image, whether intentional or not. The question is whether you're consciously designing that projection or leaving it to chance. Those with true psychological power understand that perception management isn't deception. It's careful curation of how your authentic self is expressed. What's remarkable is watching how strategic influence operates in various contexts, from boardrooms to family gatherings. The person who masters the art of tactical empathy, genuinely understanding others' perspectives while maintaining their own center, creates impact that extends far beyond their physical presence. They become thought leaders, not through domination, but through resonance. Behind the scenes of every major transformation, whether personal or organizational, you'll find these psychological principles at work. The leader who successfully navigates complex change rarely does so through authority alone. Instead, They craft compelling narratives, maintain emotional stability during uncertainty, direct attention strategically, carefully manage perceptions, and exert influence through connection rather than coercion. The revelation that changes everything is realizing these abilities aren't innate gifts reserved for a chosen few. They're learnable skills available to anyone willing to practice them consciously. The journey begins with awareness and develops through consistent application in daily interactions. If something in this explanation resonated with how you view power and influence, write "power is psychological" in the comments. I'm curious to hear which of these principles has made the biggest difference in your own experience. Developing these psychological influence skills isn't merely about following a step-by-step formula. It's about embarking on a personal transformation journey. When you begin to apply these principles consistently, something remarkable happens behind the scenes of your interactions. The walls of resistance that once stood firm begin to crumble, almost imperceptibly at first. This transition from invisibility to visibility in your influence doesn't happen overnight. It's the cumulative effect of countless micro-decisions and subtle adjustments in how you communicate. Think about someone who's mastered this art. They don't appear to be doing anything special, yet somehow they command attention and respect without demanding it. That's the beautiful paradox of psychological influence. Its power lies in its subtlety. What many don't realize is that this journey requires embracing moments of discomfort. When you first attempt these techniques, you'll likely feel awkward or unnatural. That's the hidden truth of skill development. Your brain is forming new neural pathways, literally rewiring itself to make these influence patterns second nature. The greatest masters of influence have all pushed through this initial resistance. I've witnessed remarkable revelations in people who commit to this practice. One client, a mid-level manager who struggled to get her ideas heard, began implementing just the mirroring technique we discussed. Within 3 weeks, she noticed senior executives actively seeking her input. Her ideas hadn't changed, only the psychological framework through which she presented them had shifted. The deeper impact of mastering psychological influence extends far beyond professional success. Many discover an unexpected side effect: increased empathy. When you truly understand how to connect with others' minds, you develop a more profound appreciation for different perspectives. You're no longer just trying to win conversations, you're creating genuine bridges of understanding. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining how these influence principles work in group settings versus one-on-one interactions. The dynamics shift considerably when multiple psychological forces are at play simultaneously. Understanding these differences allows you to adapt your approach contextually, making your influence even more powerful and nuanced. The mindset shift required here is significant. Most people approach influence reactively, responding to situations as they arise. True psychological dominance comes from a proactive stance, anticipating reactions, preparing mental frameworks, and guiding conversations with invisible precision. This proactive approach must be embraced quickly to prevent falling back into old patterns. If what I'm sharing resonates with your experiences or aspirations, write "Ready for Influence" in the comments section. I'm curious how many of you are already recognizing these patterns in your daily interactions. If you've stayed with me through this journey into the art of psychological influence, you're clearly committed to genuine personal growth. I appreciate that dedication. Would you do me a favor? If this conversation has sparked something valuable for you, consider subscribing to the channel. I'm constantly exploring these hidden dynamics of human psychology, and I'd love to continue sharing these insights with you. If you made it all the way to the end, drop "Ready for Influence" in the comments. It's always fascinating to connect with those who truly engage with these deeper concepts. And if you found value in what we discussed today, that like button is a simple way to signal that these topics matter to you. I've prepared another exploration that builds directly on these principles. It examines how these same influence techniques work differently in high-pressure situations. Click the video appearing now, and let's continue unraveling these psychological mysteries together.